Coming up, the Heat win a playoff rematch in Miami, and Jokic gets another triple-double. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You are listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA. Local experts joining us to go over the biggest stories on the hardwood. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you so much for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. The Celtics and the Heat met in a rematch of last year's Eastern Conference Finals, Miami getting the 3-point win at home. Both Locked On Heat and Celtics recap the matchup in South Florida.
Down by 14 to a shorthanded Celtics team, the Heat were led by Bam Adebayo for a thrilling comeback victory to put them 5 games over 500 for the first time all season. I'm David Ramil, the host of Locked On Heat. Miami was without Jimmy Butler, a last-minute scratch due to a back injury from his pregame warm-up. But Boston was without Jaylen Brown, Al Horford, Marcus Smart, and Malcolm Brogdon. Should be an easy win for Miami, right? Well, only if you haven't been paying attention to this team with more clutch games than any in the NBA, decided by 5 points or less. Jason Tatum, on the second night of a back-to-back set, was sensational with 31 points to help build that 14-point lead. But it was Bam Adebayo, the all-star that no one seems to be talking about, who dropped 21 of his 30 points in the second half. Adebayo may already be the best defensive player in the NBA, but his growth on offense this season has been quietly spectacular, growing from a quiet secondary option that was often criticized for not being aggressive enough to a legitimate and consistent scoring threat. Put simply, Adebayo is evolving into a superstar before our very eyes, and Miami's improved record is certainly proof of that. Oh, yeah. And Miami won tonight's game by just 3 points, another clutch victory. For a recap of tonight's game, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Heat.
Boston Celtics looked like they had this thing in control, and then the fourth quarter happened. John Corrales from the Locked On Celtics podcast. Boston Celtics get outscored by 10 in the fourth quarter, but give up a 15-0 run, go scoreless for 6 minutes. The Miami Heat zone, once again, confused the Celtics, and without Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, Al Horford, Malcolm Brogdon, the Celtics were relying on some guys that probably didn't see this zone as regularly as they needed to help bust it. Guys got tired at the end. Peyton Pritchard played a ton. A lot of his shots were falling short, including a good look with 0.6 on the clock that fell about 8 inches short. He knew it looked online, but bottom line for the Celtics is the execution in that 6-minute scoreless stretch was terrible. And without a full complement of really important starting level players, I mean, the Celtics had enough guys on the injury report to probably make like a 6th seed or a 7th seed team. So they were missing some important guys, but without them and relying on some guys that maybe tried to do too much, like Grant Williams, who was trying to really drive and create, and he's not a creator necessarily. The Celtics just couldn't get through and get the shots, the stops, and the execution that they needed in the fourth quarter. So now it's 2 losses in a row after 9 wins in a row. They head back home to face the New York Knicks in a very winnable stretch of games here. Let's see if they get healthy and can get back on track. I'll be talking about it all on the Locked On Celtics podcast.
Jokic continuing another MVP caliber season last night, and this time the Nuggets needed all of his triple-double to get a 1-point win against the Pelicans. Locked On Pelicans looks at why New Orleans couldn't slow down the Joker and Denver.
Heartbreak for the Pelicans as they come back from 19 points down against the Denver Nuggets, but fall just short at the end. But there's more good news on the horizon for the Pelicans. I'm Jake Madison, host of Locked On Pelicans and Locked On NBA. It was a tale of two halves for New Orleans. After really struggling in the first and falling into a deep hole, you saw the team that's been a top 4 seed in the West all year. And it makes you think they could be really good. Aggressive defense, getting stops, role players like Jose Alvarado who had 14 points in the second half, making big plays, and they got the game within a point. But as they've done on this 5-game losing streak, they failed to close as CJ McCollum missed a final shot at the buzzer. It's just what happens when you're missing your 2 best players in Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram. Life gets harder. The good news is it seems not certain yet that Brandon Ingram is set to return to action Wednesday. That'll be a big boost for the Pelicans, and the team also announced that Zion Williamson's hamstring recovery is going well. Hopefully the team gets healthy soon.
Julius Randle scored 36 points. He helped the Knicks hold off the Cavs in the Garden on Tuesday. Locked On Knicks and Cavs have thoughts from both sides after a fun finish in NYC.
Redemption for Isaiah Hartenstein and a big-time win for the New York Knicks. I'm Gavin Shaw of the Locked On Knicks podcast, 105-103 over the Cleveland Cavaliers. Isaiah Hartenstein blocking the would-be Knick Donovan Mitchell shot inside the final 5 seconds to seal this one up. Marked the final minute where R.J. Barrett stripped Mitchell in a one-on-one situation on a fast break for his defensive play of the year, and Hartenstein got another block on Mitchell about 40 seconds earlier. None of it would have mattered if Julius Randle hadn't hit 8 threes, dropped 36 points, 13 boards, 4 assists on the Cavs' head, was draining from deep, was an absolute beast inside, at one point shaking off 3 different Cavaliers for a putback, and played some fantastic defense as well. The Knicks needed this one. They got it. They move on to look to build a new streak, this time in the winning direction.
Chris Manning here, Locked On Cavs podcast, after the Cavs lost to the New York Knicks 105-103 on Tuesday night. This was supposed to be Donovan Mitchell's return after he missed 3 games with a groin injury. He did play 38 minutes, 9 of 24 from the field, 24 points, 8 assists, and 6 boards for Mitchell, but struggled late, 3 straight misses in key close possessions that could have got the Cavs this win as they started a 3-game road trip. And more importantly, end of the game goes down to what he said after the fact was cramps and that he felt his groin injured again. We will see how much time he misses. We will see how much this is going to keep him out. We will see if this keeps him out longer than the 3 games he just missed for it. But a bummer for the Cavs to lose a close game, a game they probably should have won coming against a Knicks team that had just lost 3 in a row. And then you lose Mitchell on top of that in his return. We covered the whole thing and more over at Locked On Cavs. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Coming up, LeBron drops 46 and loses. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA. Today's edition of Locked On Game to Game is brought to you by Built Bar. They are the best tasting protein bars in the market, made with 100% real chocolate. They come in dozens of different flavors. I personally like the puffs, which are made with that protein-infused marshmallow. If you head over to Built.com, you can use our promo code LOCKED15. That gets you 15% off of your order. So just put in that promo code LOCKED15 to get you 15% off of your order at Built.com. Welcome back. You're listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA. I am your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you once again for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. LeBron James scored 46 points last night, but the Lakers still got blown out by the Clippers in LA. It was technically a home game for the Lakers. Locked On Lakers recaps the blowout.
This is Danny Kamenetsky, co-host of the Locked On Lakers podcast, and the Lakers lose 133-115 to the Clippers, a game that got away from the Lakers really early. The Clippers hit a barrage of threes in the first to create separation. They never let up on that front. They shot 50% from distance. 5 Clippers hit 2 or more threes in this game. They also crushed the Lakers on the boards. In the meantime, the Lakers missed 9 free throws, and Russell Westbrook, whose play can sometimes be an overblown talking point, had some really bad shot selection and some momentum killing sequences. Not the only reason they lost this game, but his play stood out a lot. On the plus side, LeBron had 46 in this game, which means he's now had 40 against all 30 franchises in the league, which is pretty remarkable. Hopefully Wednesday against San Antonio, we'll see not just the debut of Rui Hachimura, but maybe even the return of Anthony Davis. A lot more to get into, so make sure you are subscribing to Locked On Lakers YouTube channel, that you make Locked On Lakers your first listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Luka Doncic joining LeBron with a 40-point night in a loss. Dallas dropped a game by a point at home to the Wizards. Both Locked On Wizards and Locked On Mavs have more after that upset for Washington.
What's good, everybody? It's your boy Brandon Scott again from Locked On Wizards. Luka Doncic drops 41 points tonight, but it wasn't enough as the Washington Wizards win 127-126 against the Dallas Mavericks in a nail-biter. The Washington Wizards were led by 30 points by Kyle Kuzma, but how did the Wizards win this game? Simple. Team basketball, ball movement. They played as a team. They won as a team. Now, Luka Doncic did whatever he wanted, and Spencer did what he did. Add 20 points, former Wizard, that is, Spencer Dinwiddie. But it wasn't enough as the Washington Wizards get a much-needed win because this is game 1 of a 5-game road trip. Now, looking forward, Washington Wizards play the second of the back-to-back in Houston tomorrow night at 8 o'clock against the Houston Rockets. But again, This is a much needed but a great team victory. Thank you everybody for watching and have a good.
The Dallas Mavericks fall to the Washington Wizards at home at the end of their homestand for two reasons. Nick Angstead here from the Locked On Mavericks podcast here, and I don't know if I've seen a worse defended game and a worse officiated game in the AAC this year. The Dallas Mavericks just could not defend at any level, really. The Dallas Mavericks tried to defend on the perimeter, they would foul. They tried to defend in the paint, they would just let a layup or a floater go over. They tried to defend in the floater spot, it just didn't work. This Dallas Mavericks team has no way of defending right now. Their wings aren't working. It doesn't seem like their small ball lineups are working. With Christian Wood out, Maxi Kleber out, there's nobody at the rim to deter. JaVale McGee can't play. It just has become brutal. And then the officiating was just awful in this game. It really got in the Dallas Mavericks' heads. They really couldn't get over it at times. Luka got called for a tech. Jason Kidd got called for a rare tech. And it was just all over the place. And Dallas Mavericks really suffered in their own way because of it.
The Indiana Pacers did not lead against the Bulls last night until they were less than 5 minutes to go in the game against Indy, but Indiana kept things close enough to take over in the final minutes and beat Chicago. Locked On Pacers celebrates the comeback win against their nearby rivals.
Man, did the Indiana Pacers need that one. They take down the Chicago Bulls and end their 7-game skid. I'm Tony East, the host of Locked On Pacers, here to break it all down because this didn't look like it was going to happen. First half, Bulls have a 21-point lead. The lowly Pacers without Tyrese Halliburton and backup point guard Andrew Nembhard looked like they didn't have enough, and the Bulls were going to roll all over them. But in the second half, the Pacers found a new gear, and some guys stepped up to the levels they've been playing at prior to the losing streak. Miles Turner, 18 points in the third quarter alone, was huge in getting the Pacers from down about 20 to down to about 8 to 10, a little more manageable for the fourth quarter. And down the stretch, it was their stud rookie Benedict Mathurin who hit the three to give the Pacers a late lead. After the Bulls tied it up right after, he had another layup to give the Pacers another lead. He was awesome. Turner and Mathurin, 26 points each. Pacers win 116-110. They stay ahead of the Bulls in the standings. They're in ninth. They finally get a win after a 7-game losing streak. We'll break it all down and more on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Game to Game NBA. Thank you once again for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. Now make sure that you are subscribed to Locked On NBA and your favorite team's Locked On podcast on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts from. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.